is it that only 5% of the men in the United States succeed in life? For example, consider this statistic. Out of 100 young men who all start even in our country at the age of 25, 100 young men at age 25, 40 years later, when they would be 65, 1 is well-to-do. 4 are independent for life. 5 are working. 36 have died. 54 are stone broke, dependent on others or an agency for their support. Now, why is this? Anybody could be wiped out. Disease or illness could take away their money, but that isn't generally what happens. They wind up broke as a group because they don't think too much about it. And here's where we, I think, can be of real service. What do they do that's wrong? Now, before we get into that, let's define success. What is success? Success, to my mind, is nothing more than the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. By that I mean if we're here and we want to get there and we know we want to get there, we're successful. As long as we know where we're going in life, we're successful. By definition, the people who do not know where they're going, what they're working toward, are then not successful. A survey was made one time with thousands of working individuals, and they asked them this question: why do you get up in the morning and go to work? 19 out of 20 didn't know, had no idea. Why? Well, the experts claim it's because they conform. Why do they conform? They're taught to conform. From the time we were a foot tall, we've been conforming. We're told what to do by our parents, which is natural and good. We get into school. What's the most important thing to a young fella in school? It's to be liked by the other kids, right? Of course. He wants to belong to the group, do what they do, laugh at the same things they laugh at. It's only natural. All right, he gets out of school and he generally goes into service. Again, he must conform. In fact, in the military service, they carry conformity to an extent that would shatter the credulity of a low-grade gorilla. But it's the only way you can run a military service. We want them all shooting at the same people. This, again, is perfectly natural. But now we come to the tricky part. This young man is 25 years old. He's out of school, out of service. What does he do? Generally, he goes back to his hometown. That is, if he's single. If he's married, of course, he goes to his wife's hometown. Let's say he's still single. One day he's standing on a corner in his hometown, and a friend comes up and says, "Charlie, what are you doing?" He says, "Oh, nothing." He said, "Why don't you come down and go to work where I work? It's a good place, and they pay regularly." He says, "Okay, I will." He does, and spends the rest of his life there, and that's the end of him. 95% of all jobs are obtained by random application, which is just another way of saying that the average young man spends more time over the selection of a necktie than he does his life's career. But what happens after he gets on the job? Generally, again, without thinking, he conforms. He begins doing his job the same way all the other fellows are doing their jobs, at the same rate of excellence, or whatever you want to call it. He doesn't want to be too conscientious. He might stand out. The fellows might find some terrible way of getting even with him. They might not let him on the bowling team. Or if they let him on the team, they might not let him keep score, but they'd find some way of getting back at him. What does he do then? Generally, he marries. Wonderful. He does the same thing I did. He goes out and gets a little house that looks exactly like every other house on the block. It makes him feel comfortable. For 2 weeks, he puts a brick in front of it so he'll stumble over it, know which one is his, and then after 2 weeks, he can remove the brick and he'll just automatically turn into the right house. He gets a little car, looks like the other cars, and now here's the American dream. A 40-hour-a-week job, the highest paycheck in the history of the world. He's got 50 years staring him in the face, 50 years in the golden era that man has been dreaming of since the days of Pericles. Now, what's he going to do with them? Well, he works 40 hours a week. This leaves him 72 hours a week when he's neither working nor sleeping. Now, what does he do with these 72 free hours a week? Almost twice the time he spends on the job earning a living for his family. Generally, he does the same thing with his 72 hours of free time a week that the other fellows are doing with theirs. He does nothing at all with them. On a typical day, he'll get through work and go home and walk in the back door and kiss his wife and say, "I'm tired." No one knows why. They believe that he says that because his grandfather said it back in the time when people really got tired, and it's just sort of been handed down from father to son until he still says it. He eats a very average meal and then usually hurries into the living room where he reaches out and turns on his escape box. The screen lights up and figures and horses and cowboys and things start moving around on there. And so for the next 4 or 5 hours, he becomes lost in a world that he must feel is superior to his own, or he wouldn't be so quick to jump into it, would he? For 4 or 5 hours, he sits there and watches other people earn excellent incomes in the pursuit of their careers, while he doesn't make a nickel. and gets the only two things you can get from watching television: red eyes and a hollow head. Oh, there's some wonderful television shows. I watch them myself. I've got a television set. I've got a car, too, but I don't go home at night and ride around the block for 5 or 6 hours. In fact, there's a geneticist who has said that in ages to come, if things go on the way they're going now, we'll no longer have two eyes like we have now. We'll only have one. It'll be up high on the forehead, and it'll be shaped like a television tube.